Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, despite widespread opposition and fears of exacerbating deadly political turmoil, millions of Burundians turn out to a vote in a controversial referendum that could extend President Pierre Nkurunziza's rule until 2034. Also, concern grows in Kinshasa as the World Health Organization confirms a case of Ebola in Mbandaka, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo's northwestern Equateur province. And as Zimbabwe waits for the final date of elections provisionally planned for around July, divisions are deepening in the opposition MDC party ever since the death of its longtime leader, Morgan Tsvangirai, back in February. But first, millions of Burundians turned out on Thursday to vote in a controversial referendum that could extend the rule of President Pierre Nkurunziza. Now, he's campaigned forcefully to extend presidential mandates from 5 years to 7, potentially adding 14 years onto his current term when it ends in 2020. Now, the plebiscite is being carried out amidst a political crisis. Nkurunziza's opponents say that he's already outstayed his legal welcome. Over 1,000 people have been killed since unrest broke out in 2015 over Nkurunziza's eventually successful bid for a third term. Burundians faced the threat of a 3-year jail term for not voting on Thursday, and there was international concern about the exercise and the risks of violence associated with it. Now, Gina Moore is in Bujumbura. She speaks to us now from the capital. Gina, Nkurunziza's opponents are reporting widespread intimidation of voters. The government, though, is saying Thursday's all going swimmingly. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing a little bit of both. In so many things, this one too, it depends on who you're talking to. But the polls that I visited and that the folks I was working with visited seemed relatively calm. And even the opposition has said that their campaign, while it faced some intimidation during the campaigning time, incidents were, small to insignificant. Those are their words. So, I guess it's going to depend a little bit on what kind of documentation and follow-up can be done. But by and large, the whole process has seemed much calmer and in a way more open maybe than a lot of people expected.
So what were people expecting?
I think that there was some expectation because of the situation in the last 3 years since Pierre Nkurunziza has moved into his third term, that there might be more of a crackdown. There's a lot of human rights documentation, a lot of United Nations documentation on disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and torture. Many people here say that things have gotten better. Things are more stable, approaching stability. And there's been some press crackdown, too, even recently. 2 weeks ago, the government ended the broadcast of BBC and Voice of America inside the country. So there's tensions with the press. There's an expectation that maybe there's not totally open and free political space. People say privately that they don't feel comfortable shouting their opinions publicly necessarily, but there are certainly some people going to the polls and voting no.
Do you think that if the outcome is a no, that that could go some way to diffusing the current political crisis?
I think either way it goes, there's a set of challenges, and I think that, there will be an outcome. There's a question of whether there is any good outcome in a situation like this. I think the crisis, though, may have passed. I think that the moments of crisis here were in 2015 when the president said that he was going to run for a third term. And then we saw a lot of instability, problems with protests after that. Things have calmed down quite a bit since then. And I think that what we're now looking at is a party that has come through crisis, trying to figure out how to steer the ship of governance a little bit, whatever that may mean here.
Thanks very much. Gina Moore there for us in Bujumbura. Now, many believe the outcome of the referendum is pretty much a foregone conclusion that could see Nkurunziza lead the country until 2034. Nicolas Chamard tells us more about him.
Pierre Nkurunziza is 54 years old and he hopes to remain in power many more years. He's ruled the country for 13 years and is more popular in rural areas than in the capital Bujumbura. If the yes vote wins this referendum, that would mean he could run 2 more times for a 7-year mandate and remain president until 2034.
The day has come, the 17th of May 2018. We are very happy that the people woke up early this morning to vote yes or no regarding the amendment of the Constitution.
The critics of this former sports teacher, who spent 10 years in an armed rebel group, say the ruling party put pressure on Burundians to vote yes. They say he's become increasingly authoritarian since 2015. That year, the evangelical leader, who believes he was chosen by God to rule, announced his candidacy for a 3rd mandate. That sparked a wave of violence. 3 years later, more than 1,000 Burundians have been killed and more than 400,000 have fled the country. Nkurunziza argues that his candidacy was legal because the first time he was elected by parliament, not by the people. The Arusha Peace Accord that paved the way for peace after the civil war stated that no one could rule Burundi for more than 10 years.
There are a lot of people who are contesting the kind of draconian way of changing the constitution. And already Burundi is in a state of semi-civil war.
With this referendum, Nkurunziza is walking in the footsteps of other presidents in the region who are also seeking to extend their mandates. In Rwanda, a similar reform means Paul Kagame, who's been the de facto leader for 24 years, can run again several times and possibly stay in power until 2034. And in Uganda, Yoweri Museveni, who's 73 and who's been at the helm since 1986, has scrapped presidential age limits.
DRCongo's Ebola outbreak has spread. Despite a ramp-up in precautions, the World Health Organization's confirmed a case of the virus in Mbandaka, the capital of northwestern Equateur province. A total of 44 cases of Ebola had been reported in rural parts of the province since last week. 3 confirmed, 20 probable and 21 suspected. Amongst them are 23 deaths, and there are concerns the disease could reach the capital. Pierre Delrieux tells us more.
Concern is growing in the streets of DRC's capital, Kinshasa, after another case of the deadly Ebola virus was confirmed in the nearby city of Mbandaka.
Mbandaka is way too close to Kinshasa. And with Ebola reaching the city, I want the authorities to organize medical controls in airports, in ports, especially on boats coming from this infected side.
If this Ebola outbreak ever reaches Kinshasa, there'll be death here.
Mbandaka is a densely populated provincial capital on the Congo River and a crossroads city of more than 1 million people. This first urban case significantly escalates the risk of an epidemic in the region, as the virus travels far more easily in heavily populated areas. The situation has prompted the World Health Organization to convene an emergency committee on Friday to consider the danger of the disease spreading to other countries.
So far we rate the risk of spread within the country as high, of regional spread, so to neighbouring countries, as moderate, and then of true global spread as low. But we're in the process of revising our risk assessment because of this news about the case in Mbandaka.
On Wednesday, the NGO Doctors Without Borders sent just under 27 tons of Ebola virus response materials to DRC, including isolation tents, beds, and protection suits. It is the 9th time Ebola has been recorded in Congo since the disease made its first appearance near its northern Ebola River in the 1970s.
Zimbabwe is still waiting for an exact date for elections that have been provisionally set for around July. They'll be the country's first without long-time leader Robert Mugabe, who ruled the country since independence in 1980. New President Emmerson Mnangagwa's promised free and fair polls. It's a pledge that the opposition MDC party hopes might give them a credible shot at office. However, since the death of their longtime leader Morgan Tsvangirai in February, divisions have been deepening over how to move forward against the ruling ZANU-PF. Our correspondents report.
His militants are already singing his name. Following the death of historical leader Morgan Tsvangirai, Nelson Chamisa took over the reins of the main opposition.
We are going to start building a nation. For the past 38 years, we have had a country and not a nation. We don't want to be ruled, we want to be governed.
But some members of the MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change, have decided to boycott his meetings. Linda is the spokesperson for the MDC of Dr. Coupe, who accuses Nelson Chamisa of being self-appointed. This faction is using the same name and the same colors as Chamisa's faction. With the presidential elections planned in less than 3 months, all militants are campaigning under the same MDC brand. But Linda says the courts should ultimately decide who can or cannot use the name.
Thank you very much. They have to deal with the legitimacy issues first, and it has to be done by an impartial court of law. And after that has been done, we can start talking about who has the right to use the party logos and the party symbols and everything else.
Infighting within the opposition makes headlines every day, and sadly so, says this lawyer, a founding member of the MDC in 2000. He thinks that these divisions are inevitable.
In any struggle which takes too long to succeed, people begin to get tired. People begin to see shortcuts. People begin to disagree on strategy, on priorities, on tactics, and hence you get the sort of divisions that we've had in the past, that we still have, because it will be better off if we're all on one side and the ruling party on another.
ZANU-PF, the party that has ruled the country since independence, has no intention to leave.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Reporters Plus, presented by Mark Owen.
Palestine, Israel, conflict, settlements, words and names which are constantly in the news since 1948. What does life look like under occupation for Palestinians today? Our reporters James Andre and Liana Saleh went to meet those who live in Area C in the West Bank, where Israel maintains full administrative and military control.
Reporters Plus on France 24 and France24.com.